everyone, my name's Connor and welcome back to the channel. As many of you probably know, housing costs, whether that be a mortgage repayment or renting, is usually the biggest expense we as humans have. And so naturally, those of us who nerd out over personal finance try to find the best, most efficient ways to go about these things. And while there are literally thousands, if not millions of videos and articles on how to buy a house, how to get the best deal, and things related to actually purchasing real estate, there really isn't that much information on how to be really efficient when renting. And what makes things worse is an idea that's pushed non-stop in the finance space, particularly in Australia, and that is that you need to get into real estate as soon as possible, no matter what, and renting is always a bad idea. And this is just plain not true. Now, don't get me wrong, I personally invest in real estate, and I feel it is a really good investment for most people. However, there are times in your life when renting just makes so much more sense. Whether that's because you're not exactly sure where you want to settle, in the case of buying your own home, and you don't really know what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years, or whether you're straight out of school, moving to a new city, or heading to university, there are many cases where renting would make much more sense. And as someone who moved out of home at the age of 17 and who's worked in real estate and rented many properties myself, today I'm going to share my top tips for renting your very first apartment and how to save the most money doing so. To start, you're going to need to figure out how much you're going to spend on rent per fortnight, week, month, whatever it is. Now, there are many answers to this question all over the internet, but in my personal opinion, you're going to want to have between a quarter and a third of your income go towards rent. So for example, if you earn $1,000 a fortnight, you would want your rent to be around about $250 to $333 per fortnight. The second tip, and this is something that you want to do really early on, probably even before you start going to inspections, is to make sure that you have enough money available to cover the initial costs of signing the lease. To give you an idea, what you'll normally need to fork up is a bond, which is usually 4 weeks worth of the rent, and then your property manager or landlord may also require that you pay 2 weeks in advance. Now, depending on how many things you're bringing to the property, you'll need to make sure that you account for the costs of moving. If you're going to outsource the work and have a full removalist company come, pack up your things and take it to the new property, you're going to want to have a really good idea of all of the fees they charge. For example, I had a roommate a couple of years ago who went with a removalist company and they charged him an extra fee for every step they had to climb up. So you can imagine if you were multiple stories up, that would really add up. So if you are going to go with an external removalist, make sure that you read through the fees and the terms very carefully. If you want to know how I do it personally, I actually have a membership with GoGet, but you can use any other ride-sharing service. We get a normal white van and we can rent that for $9.90, I believe it is, per hour. And so you get that for a couple of hours, make sure that you can pack all the things in a couple of trips, and it usually is the most cost-effective way to transport things. Now, obviously, if you have huge bits of furniture that can't be broken up into pieces, it might be an option, but for me, it fits the fridge, the washing machine, my couch breaks up into multiple pieces, so it's just perfect. And finally, you're gonna wanna make sure you have a little bit of money for food as well. Usually when you're moving and you've had a huge day of moving boxes, rearranging, driving all around the city, or in my case, driving interstate, the last thing you want to do when you get home into your new apartment is get out your groceries, unpack, and start cooking. So you probably want to account for a little bit of money to go towards takeout. And trust me, those nights, the takeout food is always so much better. Now, the third point you want to keep in mind, and this is really important, you're going to want to gently tap the like button. Now, I know that was super cringe, but I have to mention it. If you guys were finding any value whatsoever in this video, we would really appreciate if you could just like this video. It helps us out tremendously, and that's it. I won't mention it again. Now, moving on to number 3, you're going to want to go to as many inspections as possible, and you'll want to make sure that you view the property in person. Never, enter into a lease or hand over any money before you've seen the property in person. The best way to find properties that are up for lease is to look online. Now in Australia, we have sites like realestate.com.au, domain.com.au, realestateview.com.au, and property.com.au. So make sure that you look for properties across each of these websites, and make sure that you look in surrounding suburbs or multiple areas that you can potentially live in. Now, one quick bonus tip. Let's say you're looking on a Tuesday evening for properties that are available, and the next scheduled inspection on the website is Saturday. What you might want to do is, if it fits your parameters in terms of what you need and the price, try reaching out to the real estate agent directly and asking for an early inspection or a one-on-one inspection. Usually they're wanting to get rid of these properties sooner rather than later, so they may be able to fit you in during the week. Use that to have one-on-one time with the property manager, build a good relationship, and if they'll allow you, submit the application as soon as possible. And that brings us on to tip number 4, which is make sure that you have all of the documents ready before you go to the inspections. Things that you'll most likely need is some sort of ID, so whether that's a driver's license, a passport, a birth certificate. You'll need some sort of proof of income, so whether that's bank statements, a notice of assessment, tax return, or pay slips. And then for those of you who have rented previously, some sort of rental ledger, which is a record of a previous lease that you had and all the payments you made, checking that you made them on time, some copies of utility bills, and potentially a copy of your previous lease. Now, for those of you, which maybe most of you, who haven't rented a property before, you may be able to get around this by just uploading the documents that you do have and adding some sort of character or work reference. But if you're younger, you may want to consider asking one of your parents to be a guarantor for the lease. Another option you could do is, if you're going in with roommates, hopefully one of your roommates will have rented a property before and they can include their rental ledger, previous lease, utilities, etc. Now, number 5, and arguably the most exciting one, is don't be afraid to negotiate. Now, keep in mind, you have to use your common sense here. If the property has only recently come onto the market and at the inspection there's hundreds of people, then you're probably not going to want to negotiate, because likely there's someone else there who is going to just agree to the terms preset. However, it does really help to put yourself into the shoes of the landlord. So what I mean by this is understanding the gravity of having a rental property that doesn't have renters in it, and how in a lot of cases, getting in a good tenant sooner at a lower price is better than waiting longer and getting a higher price. It's quite simple, really. Say there was a property that was listed for $510 a week, and you come in with an offer and say, I can move in next week for $500 a week. If they accept your offer at $10 less a week, that's only $520 across the year that they've lost. But if they were to reject you and you didn't go ahead with the property and the property was vacant for 2 more weeks, that's $1,000 that they've lost. So make sure you use that understanding to your advantage. When you're at the inspection, make sure you're asking these questions of the real estate agent. How much did the property go for last time? How long has it been vacant? Things like that. To give you an idea, this is exactly what we did to get this property I'm sitting in right now. When I went to the inspection, it was extremely quiet. And I was asking the real estate agent, hey, how long has this property been on the market? And he was saying that it had been vacant for 5 weeks. So that's huge for the landlord. Now, I was pretty confident that if we could move in sooner rather than later, that they would accept the application. However, to sweeten the deal even more for them, I added one extra term, and that was to extend the length of the lease. So what we did was we submitted an application that was $30 per week cheaper than what they'd advertised for, but I said that we could sign a 14-month lease, and they came back with an offer that was $10 more expensive than what I asked, so $20 cheaper rather than $30, which was fine, and they were happy with the term. Now, just bear in mind, there are a lot of things that are unknown until you actually live in a property. So you don't want to push extending the lease too far in the case that you get stuck with a property that is not what you want. But bumping it up a couple of months is a good way to have a more attractive offer and be able to lower the rent in negotiation. Tip number 6, make sure you get everything in writing. And this not only goes for the rent itself and the term of the lease, but things like what utilities are covered in your rent. For example, most of the properties I've rented have had water included. Some of them have also had gas as well, but make sure that you check it's in the lease itself. Make sure it's clear what happens if your rent is late, whether there's any parking or additional storage included. And just on the parking note, both of my previous rentals haven't had on-site parking. So unfortunately for my car, it's been parked on the street for the last 2.5 years now. And so the previous property I was at actually had 3 parking permits included in the lease. However, this latest one that I'm at doesn't have it, and I need to pay the council in order to get a permit. So make sure you know that. Make sure you check any of the terms about gardening or pets, which appliances are included, whether there's a dishwasher or a dryer, or a washing machine or a communal washing area. Make sure you know all of that, and make sure you know whether or not subletting is allowed. A real life example that should hopefully motivate you to make sure that everything is in writing is what happened to me a couple of years ago. I went into a rental lease with 2 other housemates, and the room that I was moving into didn't actually have a built-in wardrobe like the other 2. And it was quite a small room. So in the initial inspection and in our negotiation, we spoke over the phone and in person about having a landlord add an additional wardrobe to my room. And it went as far as the property manager messaging me saying that the people coming to install the wardrobe were on their way. For whatever reason, they didn't come, and months went by and nothing happened. And there's no happy ending here. I never actually received the wardrobe, but I would have had a much stronger case if that was written into the lease. Tip number 7 is to know your rights. As a renter, you have certain rights as to how much notice the landlord or property manager needs to give you before they can come, which expenses lie with the landlord and which are you required to pay, all things like that. I'll put a link to the legislation that governs all of that if you would like to take a look. Tip number 8 is to make sure that you get the best deal on utilities. Now, like I said before, make sure you check the lease to figure out what exact utilities you do have to pay for, and then make sure that you're getting the best deal. Now, you'll see if you type in energy provider comparison, there are a lot of sites that pop up. However, what you'll find is that usually how these sites are paid is by affiliate links with those providers. So these websites may have some invested interest in pushing a particular provider over another because that company will pay them. So I would recommend going to the government website, which obviously doesn't have any of that, and it's by law that all providers and all of their plans are listed on this website. So you're getting an unbiased view of everything that's available. I'll also put a link to that in the description below. And just a quick, really random tip about this as well. Make sure when you get your first bill, you study it well. Because, funnily enough, in one of the properties I stayed at before, I noticed that when we got our first bill, it was extremely high. Anyway, I ended up contacting the provider and found out that they were charging our property as a business. So the property was previously an office building which had been converted into a residential apartment, and it hadn't been switched over on the records. And so we were getting charged business rates rather than personal residential rates. So make sure you check that and understand the bills well. Tip number 9, just before you move in, make sure that you take pictures of everything and complete the condition report very thoroughly. You don't want to be liable for scratches or marks on the wall that were there when you moved in, but you didn't take a photo of them, you didn't note them down in the condition report, and there's no proof that you didn't do the damage. So make sure that you complete that and return it to the real estate agent as soon as possible, and make sure that you have photos documenting everything. Tip number 10 is if you do need to buy furniture, look on Gumtree or Facebook Marketplace. You have no idea the sort of gold mines that are available there and just how much money you can save. For example, the wardrobe that we have in our master bedroom was completely free off Gumtree, and we saved ourselves hundreds of dollars. And one quick bonus tip for the furniture. This is something that I wish I'd known before I started renting an apartment with friends, but if there is new furniture that the property needs, do not split the cost. It is much safer, much more stress-free if individuals buy whole bits of furniture, so that at the end of the day, when you eventually stop living together, you take your furniture and there's no confusion about who takes it. If you do have to split the cost, who gets what, just buy individual pieces on your own and then take them from yourself. And number 11, the very last tip for this video, this is for when you've finished your lease and assuming you've behaved yourself and the property is in great condition, you paid your rent on time, ask your landlord or the property manager to write you a rental reference. Basically, this is a document that explains that you were great tenants, you paid your rent on time, you were a pleasure to deal with, and that will just give your rental applications in the future a little boost. But that's about all for this video. So I hope you found value in these tips, and hopefully you can learn from the mistakes I've made in the past when renting properties. And if you enjoy videos like this on personal finance, investing, and business related topics as well, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that notification bell, and you'll be the first to know when we post any new videos. But if you really enjoyed it and can't wait that long, here's a video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy, and this is our latest video. Hopefully one of those will appeal to you, but if not, I'll see you in the next one.